we are good to go. All right. So, g'day, Ned. How you going, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, Jay.
That's good. So,
Yourself?
good, mate. Good. So, together we are Ferg's Footy Fanfare. So, what we are, we're just two cousins, just living across the other side of Victoria from each other. And pretty much we're going to get together every week and just talk footy, talk a whole bunch of stuff that comes into our brains, give our 2 cents on it all. And can't wait for the footy to get back. And I know that you're pretty much the same, Ned. You got anything to add?
Yeah, that's right. There's not much footy going on, but there's definitely a lot to talk about. That's for sure.
100%. Well, I reckon that we get straight started into it straight away, see how that goes. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is the AFL Hubs, which over the past few days has copped a lot more criticism and probably a lot more airtime than it has in the previous weeks. So, Ned, I guess we'll start talking with you. What do you feel about it initially, and then more so in the past couple of days, what everyone said about it, including the Players Association?
Yeah, so I thought the hub idea would probably have been the most logical way to have been able to have any football in the next to near future. But from what the AFL has proposed, and obviously the response from the AFL Players Association, I think they're a long way from meeting somewhere in the middle or anywhere to an agreement. I think, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's just we'll put a hypothetical out there. Let's say that for some reason all the players are, more comfortable of being able to play football for maybe, 10 weeks. And I know that earlier on you were talking about how they could switch it up from different locations so people are able to see their families for a period. But let's just say they're able to do 20 weeks non-stop football. Where do you think would be the best place to have that?
I think, yeah, we did discuss this earlier in the week, and I think Melbourne has to be the place. I mean, the facilities, you could actually easily rid the home ground advantage that all the interstate clubs are talking about. All the grounds they have around Melbourne.
Yeah,
All the grounds means there's going to be a lot better maintenance as well of the grounds. So, if you have a week where it's bucketing down with rain, you're not going to have any, you're not going to have any poor condition grounds because you can let them rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you also look at Melbourne, it's got the best economic implications for the AFL. The amount of
Yeah,
expenditure they have to have in terms of accommodating interstate teams would be vastly reduced. And even then, you still have 10 teams that are able to see their families, which is a bit of a disadvantage for non-Victorian clubs. And I guess that goes into that whole kind of Victorian bias that's also been coming up in the news this past week.
yeah. I think though, yeah, with the financial implication, I think that because right now in Melbourne, there's not many hotels that are being accommodated at the moment. Can they maybe bring families in if that's what it is? And if so, Melbourne definitely has that to accommodate.
Yeah, no, that's a good point that you raise also. And I mean, I guess that every town is wanting to make themselves available for so just even by the you know, the state economic side of things, like they're able to receive vast amounts of money in terms of having people stay at accommodation, training facilities. You got to have, players trying to work in gyms and all that. So I'm not too concerned about how, in terms of social distancing, they need to go to work. They have like that's their job. That's what they're getting paid for. But I guess that's the main issue that comes to Victoria is the stage 3 restrictions in at the moment. They're far stricter than any other state. So
Yeah, and I think if they're going to be lifted, it's not going to be until the 11th of May, which still doesn't look very promising for us here in Victoria.
yeah,
That's going to be lifted, especially with the increase. They want 100,000 tests done within the next fortnight. I think
yeah.
we're going to see maybe a rise in fresh cases.
So do you believe that if they are able to get this started after May 11, regardless of where it's held, that they would need to do continuous testing week in, week out to ensure that there's no further cases? Or
I don't think so. If they're, if they're all in sort of the one place and if they're all doing the right thing, they shouldn't have to be. But obviously, you never really know what happens.
Yeah. And just a little bit off topic here. What do you think of the WA clubs being banned from training in groups of more than 10?
I personally think it's pretty silly. I
Yeah.
think if they're legally allowed to by their given state, I think it does not really give them any much more of an advantage.
hmm No, I tend to agree 100% on that. And if anything, I mean, then this brings it straight back up to the Vic bias. Play a grand final at the MCG, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's certain things that go where advantages are just inherently given to other clubs. So I don't see how this
Yeah.
should be any different, just based on your location. I think if you've been given the all clear to go and train, then you should be able to.
Yeah. Also, if we are to do the hubs, I did read today that I'm pretty sure NRL clubs, which they get underway the end of next month, they'll be allowed to take 14 non-players with them. So like medicos and all that. How do
Is that
we
on
look at
top
that
of
as
coaching
well?
staff?
So that's non-players, I believe, non-participating
Okay.
people who are, medicos, and I suppose it must be coaching staff and all that as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think you definitely have to limit the amount of numbers that you'd have going to games.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you couldn't take the whole team, like the whole
No,
squad.
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Have you heard the news coming out of Adelaide? I think it was this morning or perhaps yesterday, saying that they've already informed 7 or 8 players that their services won't be required next year.
No, I haven't, but I did hear that there may be a proposed list shortening, which will probably be more into our next topic, but I did see that they may be looking to cut list to 35.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's coming from, and I think that's probably just going to be attainable for, um, for the next couple of years, which actually surprisingly does bring us into our next topic. You have anything else any points that you've missed out on the hubs that you want to let the people know?
Nah, I think we've covered that quite well.
All
I
right,
mean, there's not.
Stunning then, Ned. So we'll head over to VFL season and the reserves football dilemma.
Yeah, so VFL's cancelled, is it not? I'm pretty sure it's cancelled for
From
the
what I've
whole
heard, it is, yeah.
season. Yeah, so with these proposed list shortenings to 35, yeah, what does it mean for our reserves? I mean, does that mean that affiliated sides have to field say another 20 or so non-AFL listed players?
Mm. I think that in particular, I mean, we're both from Victoria. It's probably just best to talk about the VFL in these circumstances. But the independent clubs are going to struggle enormously, almost to the
Yeah,
point where they won't be able to run. I mean, you have the two standalone teams in Williamstown and Port Melbourne that are run quite successfully, and
yeah,
have quite good results on the field. But then you still have quite a number of clubs that will struggle off the field. And, the first one that I tend to think of is Frankston Football Club, who the past couple of years
yeah,
have really struggled financially, just gotten back on their feet. But in the next couple of years, in terms of the funding that they'll be able to receive and the cost that it takes to run a VFL club, I can't see them performing well. I mean, not that they have been performing well, but whether they'll be able to stand up at all.
yeah. Well, Port, I don't think are as well off as what we think. I remember seeing on the Footy Show 2017. Obviously, Port went on to rob Richmond of the flag that year. But they were in a lot of financial struggles throughout 2017. But I think maybe that premiership did help them a little bit. But
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to look at Carlton with Preston. They just lost their affiliation.
hmm
Preston have been a club for nearly 135 years, and just like that, gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard that it was quite a tense split between them as well. There wasn't a lot of recognition between the two clubs. There wasn't much gratitude towards the Northern Blues for their um, assistance and help throughout it all.
Yeah, no,
With
it's
the AFL reserves, I think that that you're kind of able to generate a universal competition that incorporates all the teams. You're able to focus more on development. You give, and I think especially in Queensland or something, this gives, Brisbane and Gold Coast the chance to come up against quality, Division
Yeah,
2 teams essentially. So
yeah. Well, I think everywhere you look, I mean, probably apart from the SANFL, well, Port did actually make the grand final last year, but pretty much everywhere you look, NEFL, Waffle, VFL and SANFL, the affiliated AFL sides pretty much dominate.
hmm yeah,
So I think it'll hopefully just create a bit more of a competitive nature for a state league if Victoria does end up having a semi-professional state league. But yeah, also the development of your other clubs like your your Gold Coast and all that, who I think they play pretty well against clubs up in the NEFL. I don't think there's much strong competition there. So, with them coming up against quality reserve sides,
yeah. Well, I
it can
recall
help the
Brisbane
development.
being by far the best team in the NEFL. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, they dominated.
head
I
and
think they won the
shoulders
granny
above
by
everyone
70.
else.
Yeah.
So I think that, tends to lead to the next question. If you do decide to adopt an AFL reserves competition, then do you intend to increase the list sizes?
I think you would have to. I think, yeah, you have to look at. Well, I think I think you definitely have to. I think because if you're going to be an AFL reserve, you're going to have to be considered an AFL listed player, I suppose.
Yeah. You don't think that there's any possibility of like, hiring people on small contracts in, pay them for a certain amount of game? You think it would be a list under an AFL club, an employee of an AFL club, as opposed to,
Yeah, it
something
would
that
have to be
currently
that.
occurs in Sandringham, St Kilda?
Yeah, how you have maybe like half of them are AFL listed and half of them are
Yeah,
just
correct. Yeah.
VFL listed or whatever. Yeah, I think they're all just gonna have to be purely AFL listed. I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, by that alone, then that means that you'd have to, think about increasing, the list size to
Yeah,
anywhere
I
over
think
over
I think
50.
instead of looking at 35, we're looking at 55,
Yeah.
which is maybe not something we can look at now or the next couple of years, but I think potentially in the next 5 to 10 years, it could be something quite attainable.
Yeah. So, what do you think should and will happen if this is implemented to teams such as, like these standalone teams, your Port Melbournes, your Subiacos, people like them, Claremonts, like what are going to happen to these guys?
I think the waffle and the sandfall and probably the kneefall will pretty much run as is because in those comps there's more standalones than more there are affiliates. So I think there's
hmm
still, as long as it's still funded by AFL Victoria or so on and so forth, I don't see how it can. But I think the VFL will probably be in strife. Um, with all the what you'd pretty much every club would have a pretty much a standalone side. I think probably St Kilda accepted,
Mm.
and I mean only and Carlton have just gone standalone as of recent. So I think the VFL might be in strife. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it leaves those teams in limbo a bit.
And then I guess, well, this is something that we may as well start talking about now, including the if we're going to try and increase the number on the list size, then do we want to start looking at potentially raising the age of the draft?
I believe raising the draft would be a lot better. I think from out of a lot of the players that get drafted, not many of them get a game unless you're playing
hmm
for quite a lower side, or unless you play for a side and you actually have a lot of injuries. I think Richmond played one of the most. I think they played a lot of them. I think they played the most players throughout the year, nearly.
They did,
But
they were able to put in Ross and quite a few of their younger lads.
yeah, but teams that didn't really suffer injuries, like I can't really remember West Coast playing many debutants. I think they played a couple. I don't think Geelong played a full handful.
Yeah.
They might have actually. But yeah, unless you're playing for a lesser side, or unless for the players' fortune to the club's misfortune that they get a game through too many injuries.
Yeah, I think it's interesting on the injury front as well. If you have someone, instead of being drafted at 18 and drafted at 19, you get a year for them to develop their body, play some more, TAC level football, some more reserves
Well,
football. And
even senior football. I mean, like
yeah,
playing just whatever metropolitan, suburban, or high quality senior football in some pretty good comps getting around Victoria. That's for
yeah,
sure.
that's it.
And
You get to develop your body for a year. Recruiters are able to see whether you're more injury prone. You see a lot of
yeah,
people come in first year, suffer big injuries, so there's less, less risk associated with that.
well, you've
Um,
only got to look at Daniel Gorringe, who
yeah, Gaza. He's a big advocate of raising the draft age.
what he played one carnival and he said he had 5 really good games and he knew he was never going to be any good and he somehow got taken to pick 10 and
Yeah,
about 4 years later he's been delisted by 2 clubs.
yeah, absolutely, and a king of the green vest as well. Gaza.
Yeah,
I guess the only con that I can really think of with raising the draft age is that being in limbo for a year for a young adult,
yeah,
trying to figure out what they do, whether they, begin a trade or go to university, whatever
yeah.
their ambitions are, kind of holds them in limbo. Although in saying that, that means you get
That's
a
right.
year to do whatever you want. Essentially, you've got no lights or
Yeah.
cameras on you. You're able to,
Well, most of them will be playing most of them should be playing senior football, so therefore they should be getting paid.
yeah, right.
Um, I mean, there's some financial things. Whether that a few of them might already have part time jobs, which may help that stead as well.
hmm
But yeah, like if they're sort of stuck between, well, do I want to play football or do I? Because now that they're got a year off and they sort of have the pressure of getting a job, do I risk trying to go make it big in football or do I just try and get a job and be
Yeah, it gives
a-okay
it gives the
financially now?
individual more time themselves to figure out what is best for them and
Yeah.
their career progression. Absolutely.
Mm.
All right. Well, I know we've had one round. We'll just put that out there. I'm sure everyone that's going to listen to this is aware that we've had one round. Um, wasn't a great deal of upsets, so it's
No,
going to be it's pretty by the by, but it's going to be interesting because I want to ask you who you think your flag favorite is for this year.
yeah, so it's going to be pretty dependent on if we play in a hub and where that hub is played. I think if the hub is played out of Melbourne, I really think a full strength GWS can win it. But I think if it's in Melbourne, I'd still be standing pretty strong with Richmond. I think, they just play the G better than anyone else, really.
Yeah. No, look, I have to say that, Richmond is the
What's your
team to be,
prediction, mate?
yeah, Richmond's the team to be scared of. Um, I think in that round one game against Carlton, they played football for 2 quarters and then turned off because they're that good they've got a
Yeah,
license to do it.
that
So
that first quarter, just really won the game, and they just cruise controlled from then on. I think.
yeah, I also really like the look of Collingwood. Um,
Yeah, Collingwood.
they've got a
Collingwood
couple
do
of,
play a good way to scare Richmond. That's for sure.
yeah. Um, no, they've got a couple of genuine stars in there. But also, that mid-tier of quality within their list, is very consistent and can be relied upon a lot of the time, I think. So,
Yeah,
and in saying that, I think West Coast is right around the ball mark as well, and the acquisition of Tim Kelly is going to do nothing but
yeah. That's
promote
only
their
going to make them
chances of
better,
doing
isn't
it.
it? That's
Yeah,
right.
that's it. So it will be interesting once we start getting to the final parts of the season where those clubs are respectively. Which clubs do you think are overrated in terms of people thinking that they're flag potentials, but in your opinion, not so much?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk around Hawthorn I mean, with the acquisition of Jonathan Patton and all that, I just don't think Hawthorn are there.
Okay.
I think Brisbane as well. I think Brisbane really overachieved last year and probably they probably came in, and reaped the rewards of quite a soft draw. And I think that sort of showed come finals that even, GWS were pretty well undermanned in that semi-final. And, they somehow found a way to beat them. And I think
Yeah.
Brisbane were quite in control of that game for most of the game.
Yeah. No, I think the thing with Brisbane is they probably need to have a few more years of everyone on the park. And I think that
Yeah.
myself included, probably took them a little bit too early on in the race. They didn't really time their run as well as they would have liked, because in the last 4 or 5 weeks they were pretty poor.
Yeah. I think
Um,
they beat Geelong, but I think, Geelong had that game. They were pretty much in control of that game most of the game. And I think maybe the hot weather got to them. I know it was a 30-degree afternoon
mhm.
up there in Brisbane, so maybe the conditions suited Brisbane.
Right. Personally, I don't think the doggies are up to chop just yet. I still think they're off. And this is before all the Lockie Hunter stuff. I don't think that helps their cases at all.
Nah.
Um, my main issue with them is their backline. I know that they brought Alex Keith in.
Mm,
Alex Keith, I feel, is one of those defenders that will do well in a really good team. Your Jake Levers kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, he got given a bath in round one, an absolute bath. He's not the big, tall fullback that is successful in a one-on-one all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the issue for them. It'll be interesting to see how Norton and Bruce go up front, but I don't think they're going to have the impact
Yeah.
that
Especially with
everyone believes.
who else they got from Brisbane? Josh Shackey as well,
Yep.
working around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's a lot of tall timber.
Yeah, and then we've got the midfield, very talented group, of course. Tim
Yeah.
English is still a couple of years away, and we both share the same contention on the Bonds, is that he's definitely not the
He's
league's best player.
as per Mark Robinson.
Right?
I don't think he's the
Yeah,
best, but he's definitely a top 10 player.
yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
And then Hunter McRae and Liberatore.
Yeah, little balls
Quite a good midfield.
with
Yeah.
Mitch Wallace as well. Yeah, but no, I still think that everyone's probably hyped him up a little bit, and I wasn't expecting Collingwood to win in round one by that much. I did tip them.
Yeah.
But it was surprising, to say the
Yeah,
least.
I thought the doggies might put up a bit more of a fight. So next in Wooden Spoon, who have you got?
Wooden Spoon. Well, the first team that I'm going to start off with is, I think I'm going to start off with Adelaide. Within the past week or so, I've looked at their lists. They're kind of my outer, bottom three. I think the favourite to win the Wooden Spoon's Gold Coast. Although they did very good work over the pre-season to address any kind of issues that they were having. Able to grab 1 and 2, Rowell and Anderson, if they're able to stay on the park.
Two best pals as well, which does help.
Yep. Then they need to keep players up there.
Well,
Right,
Gold Coast did give Adelaide a bit of a shock defeat over in Adelaide during the pre-season,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember watching highlights, and Adelaide were pretty terrible, and that's why I've got Adelaide as my probable Wooden Spoon. I think Gold Coast are in the equation, and probably Sydney.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think
I've got Fremantle down there. I don't think Sydney. I think Horse will be able to keep them out of enough trouble, and their stars like Heaney, Parker might be able to do some work as well. Franklin.
I just think there's too many holes. But Franklin's always injured, so I think there's just a few too many holes in that Sydney side, and I think it does come unstuck too frequently.
And I mean, back to Gold Coast, they made solid acquisitions in Greenwood and Alice. And if Rankin's able to get out on the park, I feel like they're going to be able to start building the foundations and the stepping blocks to having a competitive list. Not necessarily,
Yeah,
I still picture them in the bottom three, but
yeah, I think that as well. So in saying that, who is going to make the biggest jump for this season?
yeah, it's a good question. Before round one, I had St Kilda. A little bit biased there, some really good pickups, and you'd think
Yeah,
a new
very very
coach
good
that
management.
a lot of the fans have a lot of trust and faith in. But they were very poor, and they had a very good first half, and then seemed to be the same old story in the second half. So if they don't fix that up, then it's going to be a very long season.
Yeah,
Uh,
there was some pretty good list management by St Kilda. I think they won despite losing probably nearly your best player in Jack
yeah,
Stephen.
Jack Stephen, absolutely, that's
But
a good call.
now he's back in Geelong, he's still suffering, injury problems. So,
hmm
you know, no Jack Stephen, you know.
I feel like Carlton's also got the potential to jump up a bit.
Yeah,
You have me stumped where they finished last year. Perhaps it was around the 14th mark, perhaps.
yeah. But they were in a lot of shambles until Teague took over, and I think they somehow found a bit of energy to
Oh,
get up and
they
about.
finished in 16th last year. So yeah, well, even more so. I think that it's hard to say. I mean, with Cruiser out in round one, that looked like it wasn't going to help them, but won't miss anywhere near as many games as initially thought.
Oh, I think it's still looking about. It was 4 months
Yeah, that's
from the
right.
proposed date, which we may be running into a longest, like a later finish date for the season. So
hmm
there may not be big ramifications, but
Exactly, yeah. But I think
maybe for
Wiedering
the
looks
early
really
stint.
good. I thought that he did a really
Yeah.
good job. I think that he's going to
Jack
be
Martin
something.
was very good as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So I feel like they have the ability to go up. What about you?
I'm thinking that I don't know what went wrong, but I think Melbourne had a very awful year last year, and
Absolutely.
I think they're better than whatever they did last year. I don't know what happened because they were a very good team in 2018. They probably did reap an easy draw a little bit, but in the end, they did make a preliminary final, and they did beat Geelong in Geelong, which is. Oh,
Do
no,
you
they didn't beat
think
Geelong in Geelong. No, they beat Geelong at the MCG in a final, and they beat Hawthorn,
Hawthorn, yeah,
who
sent
finished
them
top
out in
four.
straight sets, yeah.
So there were some pretty handy wins. So they're more than capable, but yeah, it's just whatever. Yeah, I
Do
don't
you
know.
think they're gonna
Who
have
clicks.
any an improved season with Max Gawn as their captain? Do you think that'll make a difference?
I don't really think that captaincy is whoever's captain of your club. I don't think is going to really decide on
No, I tend to agree. And
how
they
good of
had
a
Jack Viney
year.
and Nathan Jones, who seem, from an outside perspective, to be very good leaders.
I think, yeah, regardless of who's captain, there's still always going to be that maybe group of 3 to 5 players that are still always going to be leading your group, regardless if they're in the leadership group or not in the leadership group, or not a vice captain or a captain or
Yeah,
a vice captain or whatever. Yeah, I
people just
think there's
stand
still
up in your
always.
team. Yeah,
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And leadership can also come from a younger player as well. Like,
yeah,
it's just probably nearly a full team effort.
yeah. Exactly. It's more just a formality, just a title. How everyone's a leader. Everyone needs to be at certain. No, it's a bit cliche, but
Yeah, that's right.
um. All right. And with that, who do you think is going to have the biggest drop this season?
I think going from the end of last year's form, I think Brisbane will.
Yeah.
Yeah, seeing them play, they're pretty dismal. We went to Richmond, Brisbane last round of the season. They clawed their way back into it, but the game was pretty much, well and over by half time.
Mm.
You couldn't really see the game slipping out of Richmond's clench.
That's
And
right. They made it
and
interesting, but that was with only half an hour of good football. They were never really in it for any other
and
stages. Yeah.
yeah, qualifying final, they did play very well for the first half.
Yeah, they
Missed
just couldn't
shots
kick straight.
really, really killed them, but come second half, they were stuffed. And yeah, an undermanned GWS were able to somehow grind a win out of really nothing and
Absolutely. Good game, that
send them
one. That was
packing
a
in.
really good game.
Yeah, send them packing in straight sets. So, they could get better, but I just think that they're going to fall because they're going to have to play probably an even amount of games, against each side. They're not going to get as many easy games as what they did last year.
Yep.
So what do you see? Who's your biggest fall?
This one might be a bit interesting considering they didn't make the top 8 last year, but I think Adelaide's going to be the biggest fall this year. They finished 11th last year with 10 wins.
Yep.
With the changes that they made at the end of the season and the clean out that they had, I can't see it getting any better. I see it getting drastically worse for them. Like I said, I've got them finishing in the bottom 3. So, it's moving down 6, 7 places. Just in terms of, they've kind of missed that void of being able to bring in quality players that have provided for them, and now they've lost Betts, they've lost Jacobs, and they're just going to have to bring in real inexperienced kids.
Greenwood
So I think,
and Keith.
yeah, exactly. I just think that they're going to have a few years of growing pains and have
Josh
to start
Jenkins.
that phase again. Josh Jenkins, exactly right. I think they're going to really struggle to finish anywhere above 15th.
Yeah. I just thinking then. This is a team that's probably sort of in limbo. I don't really know how we think they're going to go, but what do you think on Hawthorn? I mean, they sort of seem to be in a bit of limbo.
Yeah,
for
see,
mine.
personally, I don't rate their list hugely, but they are one professional outfit, and they just get it done. Like, firstly, I reckon Alistair Clark's the best coach in the league by a country mile. I reckon he gives them 3 or 4 wins every year. Where they shouldn't win, but they win because he's their coach.
Well, that win over GWS.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the first one that comes to my head. Yeah. In terms of them being able to maintain wins in round 1 against Brisbane, that was a 50-50 game. They were just so clinical in their execution of skills, kicking for goals. They just continue doing it. They had a good finish to last year. I think they might have won the last 4 or 5 last year, and that included winning against West Coast over there in their last round.
Yeah, that's right. Sending West Coast packing out of the top 4.
Yeah, so I think they could make top 8, and then maybe that'll be something that we look at in the next few weeks, whether we want to do a top 8.
Yep.
A rolling ladder.
But the thing is, and I mean, obviously the big talking point around Hawthorn this year was obviously going to be the return of Tom Mitchell, Brownlow medalist. He is a very good player, but I just don't see that from a supporter of another club, I don't really felt any fear.
Yeah.
I don't think I fear Hawthorn anymore with Tom Mitchell or without Tom compared to without Tom Mitchell.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess whether you don't really fear him, which I agree with that, but I wonder whether having him back allows like a bit more of a weapon, someone more clinical with the ball, like Warple.
Yeah,
be a bit more outside,
or O'Meara. Yeah.
Gives them a bit more space while he does the in and under stuff.
Yeah, well, it takes a bit of load off the other players' shoulders. That's right. So
another question that I thought of for you today, Nettie, is I saw in the news that John Wartsfold reckons that with the current changes to the fixture that are going to occur, he reckons they can win the flag. No, my thoughts exactly. So do you want to give your 2 cents on that? A comment?
No, so
you could say it how it is. That's ridiculous.
If I was John Westfold, I'd be thinking probably win a final first. I think
try and make the 8 in a more comfortable position.
You're going to have to win 2 finals to make a grand final, and then you have to win a grand final to win a premiership. So I think you should probably focus on winning a final first. And I think that's what Richmond did very well in their 2017 campaign they gave themselves a good chance to win a final by getting the double chance. And I remember I was watching actually the end of season review on the Premiership DVD with Alex Ranson. He said that it was just they wanted to get that monkey off the back, so it just freed them up.
Yep.
And then once that monkey was off the back, and I think that's what Essendon are going to have to look at. But I don't think they can, because I don't think they can win the flag. They've really been poor against very quality opposition, but I
Unless they
mean,
see a
who
significant
knows?
improvement in their bottom six in their first 22 that play every week, then I can't see them having any chance of, I think they'll be battling to make finals, let alone.
Yeah,
I mean, they won by 2 points against Fremantle, who are being, described as a bottom three team. So,
and at Etihad as well.
yeah.
Yeah, Fremantle did give them quite a scare. Yeah, and I think the advantage that Woosher is talking about with what one player having kids, I don't think that's going to play much of an advantage. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be all come to an agreement, and all the players will come together in whatever format we see football in.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add, Nettie?
No, not really. I think we've covered all we've wanted to cover, and it's been a pretty good stint.
Yeah,
Very good
mate.
time.
That's it. Bloody beautiful debut. All right. So we'll probably do this once a week.
Yeah.
And
There's going to be plenty to talk about in the next up and coming weeks.
that's it. And it only gets better once the footy starts. We'll be making sure that we dissect
Absolutely.
the previous round. We'll preview the upcoming round. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
All
So
right.
we'll give
Awesome.
that a stop. Ripper.